The Russian Federation senior diplomat Sergei Lavrov will hold talks with South Africa's International Relations Minister Dr. Naledi Pandor on Monday. Lavrov's visit comes at a time when South Africa is under pressure from Western countries who are calling on Pretoria to take a tough stance against Russia after Moscow invaded Ukraine. SABC International News editor Sophie Mokoena joining us in studio now. Sophie, great to have you with us as always. So this is an important visit at the start of the year. We don't know much from our ministry except that there will be this meeting. What's expected?
Well, we expect the two leaders to discuss their relations between the two countries, particularly at the time, as you pointed out, that since the Russian military invaded Ukraine, there has been attempts to ensure that South Africa does take side in terms of supporting Ukraine and condemning Russia. The other issue will revolve around trade and investment. Of course, Russia is not our largest trading partner in Europe, but it's quite critical. You also know that the relationship dates back to exile years, when ANC was in exile, and there were ANC leaders who were in the then Soviet Union, and therefore the relationship is quite sound. And also, you know that South Africa will be hosting the BRICS summit later this year, and Russia is one of the strong, influential members of the BRICS group. And therefore, I think the issue of the coming meeting will also be on the agenda, and generally issues pertaining to global political challenges. But also, when you look at the issue of the impact of the war in terms of food security, the issue of access to grain, Russia will make a commitment that they stand ready to assist the continent to access grain from Russia.
Tell me more how you think the war in Ukraine will be handled. You said South Africa has felt some pressure. Some have accused us of taking a side. We shouldn't be neutral, they say, in the face of this. Russia even accused of targeting civilians, which they've denied. Do you expect it'll be pushed by South Africa or not really?
I think behind the scenes, the minister will try and persuade Sergei Lavrov to communicate to President Putin that South Africa stands ready to assist in terms of the negotiations. You know that South Africa has been quite vocal in terms of calling the two parties to come to the negotiations in terms of achieving a total ceasefire so that we can see an end to this war. And I think behind the scenes, they will be talking about that. But I think after the meeting, we'll see South Africa again reiterating its position in terms of supporting Russia, but pointing out that peace is the only solution and the talks are needed to ensure that this comes to an end.
And this comes ahead of the BRICS summit. You said also there's been some controversy around a planned exercise, a military exercise involving the navies of South Africa, China and Russia. What do you understand about that visit?
Well, earlier on in Davos, the Minister of International Relations, Naledi Pandor, who is there as part of the delegation, spoke to media on the margins of Davos. She pointed out that this military exercise, it's nothing new. We know that there has been such activities in South Africa where you see military, different arms of different defense force from different countries coming to South Africa, particularly when you look at countries such as France, the United States of America. In most cases, it is sharing capabilities in relation to the Air Force or the, particularly in the Breg, in Bloemfontein. That's where they normally have these activities. But this time around, it is activities, exercise in the sea, and therefore we are told that Russia will be around, and also China. But clearly there has been people who are saying, there are people who are saying that this is not a good reflection of the country, particularly at the time where Russia is engaged in this war. And therefore you have those who are for and those who are against this move. But that's what the minister told the media on the margins of Davos.
All right, so final question for you. You said the BRICS summit coming up. Could we even see Vladimir Putin attending that? South Africa will, in fact, be hosting a G20 coming up. There are rumors of the US president wanting to visit this part of the world. Is there going to be a flurry of activities, Sophie?
Yes, it is going to be a flurry of activities this year. You pointed out the BRICS summit. We don't know whether President Vladimir Putin will come in person to attend this meeting. You know that as long as you have this war in Ukraine, the issue of security will be one of the issues that he has to consider. And he cannot use the airspace in Europe with all the sanctions and for his own protection, unless he's able to use Asia and then North Africa and down south. So we don't know. Maybe on Monday, Sergei Lavrov will be able to share more information. But you are aware that Russia is working hard to strengthen its relations with its partners. Perhaps let's take a listen at what Sergei Lavrov had to say today in relation to strengthening the relationship with China, which the country that is also part of the BRICS nations. Let's take a listen.
Our relations with the People's Republic of China are at the best they have been in their history. This was said by our leaders, President Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping. The trade turnover between Russia and China is already at a record high, just under $200 billion US. I'm still counting that in dollars. It's time to do that in rubles and yuan. It will probably happen soon. The military and technical cooperation, joint drills, without a doubt, it all strengthens our strategical partnership. The West sees it all. You ask if we have data on whether the West is trying to sow discord in our relations. There is no need to look for that data. It is all publicly available. With that dual goal in mind, to constrain Moscow and Beijing, the West is trying to sow discord in our relations. They are trying to beat us so that in the future they can convince Russia to be a partner to the West, who will give mercy and lift the sanctions, but that Russia will remain a Western partner and will not oppose or even help to constrain China. Undoubtedly, getting rid of dependence on the West is much more difficult for China than for Russia. To a certain degree, the avalanche of sanctions that were implemented has made this task easier for us. It allowed us to reach the final conclusion that the people who were inviting us into the economic system cannot be relied upon or even trusted anymore.
Well, clearly, Sergei Lavrov talking about the relations between Russia and China. But as you pointed out, we are told also that the Secretary of the United States of America, Janet Yellen, is also looking at visiting South Africa. We'll have that report later today on the Globe. Our colleagues in Washington will be looking at that. That speaks to the Scramble for Africa. And we are also told that that could also be a way to indicate that President Joe Biden is also looking at visiting the continent. And I think countries such as Kenya and South Africa, if Biden does visit Africa, will be in his itinerary.
All right, thank you so much. So we could see some very high-profile individuals in South Africa in the not-too-distant future. That was our foreign editor, international editor, Sophie Mokoena. And by the way, the Ukrainian President Zelensky has just addressed the World Economic Forum, saying that Russia is exporting terror. He's calling for tank supplies and air defense units.